edition of the Roy's Boys podcast, powered by Carolina Electrical Services. For all your electrical needs, go ahead and call 704-320-7357, and my dad, Jacob Marlowe, will take care of all of that. Josh and Anthony are here with you tonight. Anthony is able to join us from his work in Florida. So, buddy, just want to welcome you in. I missed you earlier today. How's it going?
Pretty good, man. I know you missed me earlier today for the Boston College recap, but really just a phenomenal game. Luke May with 20 rebounds to go along with his 17 points. So, sensational performance from the senior who will play his last game in the Smith Center against Duke on Saturday night. And, now I had to get on here to preview the Duke game, man. I mean, this is a huge one, top 5 matchup, so I'm ready to go. I think it's going to be a sensational matchup between these two once again, even though the last one apparently came with an asterisk. This one I think is going to be just as good, maybe even a better game this time, especially if Zion Williamson is back. But, we'll talk a little bit about that here as we go throughout the show.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier, this is the second game, but you're right, with the first game having an asterisk, this is kind of like the first time we've played Duke, because for some reason the 88-72 win we had in their building just doesn't count for some ungodly reason, because one player didn't hurt, but they only had 5 other McDonald's All-Americans on that roster that couldn't handle the load of a former preferred walk-on, a transfer from Pittsburgh, and that was about it. And so, I don't know. But yeah, so Duke, Carolina, Saturday, 6 o'clock in our building. Obviously, where we like to play the game better, because, it's always more fun when it's in your building. And so what we're going to do in the opening tip, which is brought to you by Rodan and Fields, for all your skin and healthcare needs, call Joey Marlowe at 803-804-0200, is let's just take a trip down memory lane like we did when we were in Cameron.
Right.
And just discuss some of the favorite moments, pre-our era. So under Dean Smith, under Bill Guthrie, even Matt Doherty had a big win against Duke in his time at Carolina. That happened in Chapel Hill. And then, of course, what we've enjoyed in our little over 10-plus years following this rivalry as Carolina fans.
Yeah, I think the one that probably stands out for both of us was back in 2017, because, we were there on Franklin Street to celebrate a big win for a team that would eventually go on to win the national championship. And really, back at that time, let's be really honest, that team did have some flaws, and, you were really missing Bryce Johnson at times during that season. But that was a huge win. I thought that was probably one of the points in the season where you kind of said to yourself, okay, this team really does have a chance to make some noise in the NCAA tournament, because they're really playing well at the right time. And, I think that's the one that stands out most to me from our generation. And then when you look at the past games that have been played in Chapel Hill, clearly, I think one of the ones that always will come up, especially in terms of the Smith Center, is you gotta go back to 2005, which was just an unbelievable game there. It's one of those moments that everybody will talk about forever. The missed free throw, Marvin Williams goes back up with it and finishes inside. And the Smith Center was about as loud as you could hope for. I know we've seen some Tar Heel fans that were in attendance. We were way too young back then, to be able to go up by ourselves. And we all know that, it's never easy to be able to go from Charlotte to Chapel Hill with a snap of a finger. So our parents weren't, quite as, willing to drive up there as we were. But, the people that were in attendance said, they thought the building was going to come down, because that was as loud as the Smith Center has ever been. And if you go back and watch the highlights, you'd have to agree. And then I'll throw another one in there from the Dean Smith era, which was in Chapel Hill, but it was actually in Carmichael Arena, and that was the 1974 matchup where Carolina scores 8 points in 17 seconds, forces overtime. Of course, Walter Davis hits the shot that many will remember, and Carolina, of course, wins that game in overtime. So unlike Duke, who hit, the one that we talked about in Cameron and then lost in overtime, or actually double overtime, Carolina actually hit a buzzer beater and came back and won that game in overtime after being down, 8 points with 17 seconds to go. It's just a remarkable story, and I think there are so many great moments in this rivalry, but those are just a couple of the ones that stick out to me. I mean, what are the ones that in your mind really stick out to you?
I mean, I gotta agree with 17 for the main fact we were there all day. We were there for the game day show, hung out all day outside Sub Dogs and watched the game there. And we were at the very first mosh pit on Franklin Street after the win, and saw the very first fire that was lit. And surreal moment. It was a long day. I remember being extremely exhausted after it all ended, but definitely worth it. And it was kind of like in 16 where we won at Cameron, that kind of preluded that team's run to the national championship game. I thought that team needed to win that kind of game to jumpstart a deep run for them in March, and that's exactly what happened. I think back to 2011, final game of the year in the Smith Center.
Mm-hmm.
It was the last time we played them in Chapel Hill, that with the ACC regular season on the line between the two of us. And that was the year that we started slowly. Kendall Marshall took over the point guard and took over the offense. The team jumped off, and we had the big win, and that was the game where Dexter Strickland had the big dunk over, I think it was Kyle Singler in that game.
Right.
And then you think back to 05. Like I didn't watch that full game live, but Nerd means gone back and watched that game in plenty of times. It's my favorite Woody Durham call where Marvin recovers the missed free throw, banks in the shot, and gets the foul. And kind of like in 17, that Carolina team was really good. Of course, won the national championship. But if they wouldn't have beaten Duke, it might have been a different ending, just because they had yet to beat Duke under Roy Williams.
Mm-hmm.
They had lost 3 pretty much heartbreaking games beforehand, but finally got it done, and then, of course, went on to win a national championship. You got the 74 game with Walter Davis, the 8-point, 17-second. That was out of 3-point line. That was,
right.
They weren't even just fouling and getting missed free throws. They were stealing inbounds and all that other stuff to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just even more rarity in that. But I always think, Bloody Montrose. A top 5 game, and he starts bleeding, and just one of those. Whenever there's blood, it makes it better for us. You think about it, all 3 times there's been blood between the two teams. It's been all by Carolina players,
right,
in Chapel Hill, and all 3 Carolina wins. So with that in mind, if Duke wants to draw some blood on Saturday night, go ahead, because chances are you're going to lose, and whatever we got to do to get a win against those guys, I'll take it. But yeah, just a fantastic rivalry. We love it. Love it even more in Chapel Hill when we find ways to win games, especially when it's a big one like this one. The first time they've met as top 5 opponents in really quite a while for this rivalry. It's been a little bit of a drought, but as we transition to the full preview, we're going to go ahead and we'll start with a look back to what Carolina did so good in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And can they recreate that on Saturday? And what they did really good was they scored the ball in the paint with over 60 paint points. That was without Zion Williamson, but I just think their mindset was we're going to put the ball inside and we're going to keep it there. We've seen this team put it there for a 6 to 8 minute stretch, but then because we know we can shoot it, we start chunking threes. That's the one game where even though we took 20 threes in that game, we had no problem putting the ball inside.
Right.
I think that's got to be the focus going into this game, whether Zion's on the floor or not, just because we just have so much success because our bigs know how to move better than Duke's bigs. We know how to get position, get where we need to get to on the floor, and be effective. And they forced 22 turnovers, which was the most, and I think it was well over a decade for this Duke program. I think if we can do that, whether it's with pressure, whether it's with zone or whatever we throw out there Saturday, turnovers are always good, especially when you're like us. We like to run. Easy transition for Kobe White. And whenever you get open floor offense, it's just a lot easier because Duke is so good at swatting away shots and stealing the ball. It just makes our offense easier. So looking at what Carolina did good in the first game, do you think they're going to have as much success doing that again, or do you think with or without Zion there'll be more Duke resistance this time around?
I think the game plan will definitely be to take away the inside scoring from Carolina. I mean, because it really seemed like in that first game, they were more worried about taking away Coby White and the outside shooting of Cam Johnson, and that wasn't going down at all. I mean, when we look back on that game, we talked about it on this podcast, and everybody said it, countless amount of times. If you had told me that we had shot 2 of 20 from three-point land. You don't have to tell us any other stats from that first game. Even if you told me Zion gets hurt in the game, but you still shoot 2 of 20 from 3, I probably would have told you this team loses the game, if we're being really honest, because you just look at Duke and how much offensive firepower they have. But Carolina just did a sensational job, like you said, of attacking what became a weakness without Zion Williamson on the floor. And that's one of the things that I think kind of goes a little untalked about when you talk about Zion Williamson. Everybody talks about the athleticism, and everybody talks about the scoring ability, but really the guy is just – his freaky athleticism allows him to be a great defender at times. I still think that going against a senior guy in Luke May would have been a different challenge for him, and I think Luke would have gotten his points as well. But once he was out of the game, you could tell that they really just didn't have – frankly, they just didn't have the size to deal with it because they had to start going a lot smaller. I believe Javin DeLaurier was on the floor as the 4 for a good amount of time. And, if they're going to have to go that small again, the game plan for Carolina should be, get the ball inside to Luke, who I think is, pretty much since that game, he's played very well. I thought the other night against Boston College, that was one of the best things they did, was going back to that inside game a little more often than they've done in the past. Now, there were moments where they were still allowing Cam Johnson to shoot it, and why wouldn't you? Because he seems like he's in one of those rhythms where he's starting to feel it. And, Coby White has his moments as well. That's the good thing about this Carolina team, though, is that, in the past, we've had that one dimension that's been stronger than the other dimensions of the offense. And if that was taken away, we would really struggle. This year, it just feels so much different because, if we're not getting that inside game, well, Cam Johnson and Coby White might be heating up from outside, or Coby White is starting to get a little more aggressive driving the basket, and we can get to the free throw line a bunch of times. Nazir Little's helping out with that too. I mean, that, it's those type of things that I think makes Carolina so tough to stop this year. And, I would expect that the game plan would be similar. I mean, it worked in the first game. Why are you going to go away from something that worked? Make Duke prove that they're able to stop your inside game. But we'll see. Well, I think Duke's going to also make an adjustment. I don't know if people know this, but they do have a Hall of Fame coach on the other sideline. I mean, it is a pretty, we talk about the great matchups in the rivalry. I mean, this matchup between, and it's pretty weird because, I mean, look, at one time it was Dean and Kay, and now we're sitting here still talking about Roy and Kay going on, and it doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon, the rivalry between those two. But, Coach K is a guy that, look, Carolina fans, we don't like Coach K. That's a given, but you got to respect what the man does, and he's going to make some adjustments coming into this game. So if they do start to take away that game, that inside game, I mean, one of the key things, you can't start turning the ball over. And we saw some of those moments from Coby White. But here's my thing. When you were talking about the defensive side of the ball, what do you go with? I would like to see Carolina go with a little bit of pressure because, Trey Jones is a freshman as well. So he's going to have those moments where he's going to say to himself, okay, look, I know I'm a good player. I'm probably the best two-way player right now in the ACC, if we're being really honest. But if you start putting a little bit of pressure on him, it'll be interesting to see just how he reacts to that pressure. You never know if he has some of those moments where he starts turning the ball over like he did in that first game, because believe it or not, just playing in one Carolina Duke game, it doesn't really give you that feel, because the second game of your freshman year, you got to go to the other location. So it's totally different. He doesn't have the experience. Granted, Kobe White doesn't have the experience either. But I think that's got to be part of the game plan for Carolina.
Yeah, we touched on it, with the shooting. We shot 10% from three, and it was like, how did we find a way to win? I think we've got to shoot it a lot better this time around, but I'm growing more and more belief that we don't have to shoot in the high 40s from three to win these kind of games, because we haven't done it since Wake Forest. They haven't shot it well. They didn't shoot it well against Florida State.
Right.
Found a way to get a good win at home. They didn't shoot it well at Clemson. Got a very impressive road win.
Right.
They didn't shoot it well the other night in the game that was over at halftime. And a lot of that is we've seen this team, and I know the numbers against Clemson didn't really show it, but we've seen this team buy in as much defensively in the regular season as much as any Carolina team I can remember. We always know come the ACC tournament in March they're going to defend a lot better. That's a requirement. Every national contender does that.
Right.
But we've seen this team do that now, which has been fun to see. We've always wanted to see it in the regular season, that desire to play elite defense. Even though, and they've been in the KenPom top 25, I've monitored that all year. It's been very rare they haven't been among the top half or the top 20 in that area. But when they decide they want to defend, there's not a team in the country they can't beat, because we know we're going to get our points on offense.
Right.
I'm under the belief that they are going to shoot it a lot better because they are at home. But I also do worry with our three seniors, with it being their final game in the Smith Center against Duke, how much emotion comes into play against them? Does it negatively affect them? I'd like to think not, just because we've seen it for how many years. For the most part, our guys are up for the occasion, and it doesn't let the moment get to them, and just go out there and play basketball. But these are different breeds. I know the fans will be a little emotional, because you look at Luke May and what he's done, and what Kenny Williams has become a fan favorite, and Cam Johnson. You'd think Cam's been here 4 years, the way that the fan base has grown to love the kid. But we have a different segment for that later on tonight. But I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of what we did the first time is going to be what we're going to try to do in this game. But I also think some of the matchups that I thought were going to dictate the game, and Cameron will dictate this game. I thought in Cameron, whichever point guard played better between Kobe White and Trey Jones,
right,
that team would win. I think that's going to be the case in this time, because they have they understand the feeling of, at least in one environment, what this game is like. I know, like you mentioned, they don't know what it feels like to be in Chapel Hill, but they know what a Duke Carolina game at least feels like, what the energy in the building is like. And we've seen Kobe kind of respond since he struggled in that Duke game. He was sensational in the two games against Syracuse and Clemson,
right,
leading us to big-time wins. And we've seen Trey Jones continue to be as good a defender as I've seen in college basketball all year long. His offense will have to catch up to him. But, it's March. Guard play wins now. That matchup is going to have a major factor who wins.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, if you look back on that game in Duke, I would probably say that it also dictated that game. Although it wasn't on the level that you thought, it wasn't the only thing it wasn't the most important thing, I think, that dictated that. That was the matchup inside with Luke May and, whoever they were putting at the 4 whenever, he was out on the floor. But I thought, for the most part, Look, neither one of them played really a good game at all. Both of them had their moments where they turned the ball over, but I thought that Kobe White probably edged out Trey Jones in that game, just barely. I would give Kobe a slight edge. So I think you're right. Once again, it could play a factor and should play a factor. Also, one of the things that I think could play a factor is the backup point guard. We saw Seventh Woods have a huge influence in the game in Cameron. Now, of course, this is in the Smith Center, so a home crowd behind him might help Kobe out a little bit, but he is going to have those moments because Duke's not going to back off the pressure. They know that worked in the first game. They're going to start throwing that at him probably a little bit earlier than they did in the first game to see how he reacts. And in some of those moments, you're going to need Seventh Woods to come in there and calm the game down, which I think, he's done that for the most part when he's played extended minutes in games. Other times, of course, he'll come in and usually that's just to give Kobe a breath or, let him get on the bench and get some water because, man, that kid plays about as hard as any point guard that we've ever seen. At Carolina. I mean, we've talked about it on and off, about where he ranks among Carolina point guards. I think when it comes to just simply playing hard, it's got to be him or Ty Lawson when it comes to point guards. And, I mean, he's got to be up there with Tyler Hansbrough and some of those guys because this kid is always looking to make a play. But, I think one of the other matchups, and I talk about this just about every time that we talk about the Duke game because it seems like that 5 position is the spot where you got a guy that always steps up for these games. And I feel like Garrison Brooks will do that again this year. I feel like he knows he has to have another good game, especially if there are points to be had on the inside. And he's a guy that really seems to get extra motivation by playing Duke. I mean, just everybody does, but it's really, really noticeable with Garrison. So I'd keep an eye on him. I think that matchup inside between him and who do they start that? Oh, they start Bolden. That's right. They do start Bolden down there, and then Jack White will usually have to rotate in. Here's the other thing that people probably don't remember from that first game. Remember, Marquise Bolden got into foul trouble early on in that game, and that was a huge turning point because then they had to put Jack White in at the 5 because there was no Zion as well. So I think that, first of all, that shrunk their bench by a ton, which is, one of the areas that I think a lot of people thought they had the advantage against Carolina for the first time in a very long time, depth-wise. It'll be interesting to see if Bolden does stay out of foul trouble and is able to stay on the floor, what kind of effect he can have because, he has had some moments as well against Carolina. It seems like he's one of those guys that also receives a little bit of extra motivation. But I think that's one of the matchups to keep an eye on, too, is Garrison Brooks versus Marquise Bolden down low.
Yeah, one of the things I did note of was role players. This rivalries have a history of, especially this one, of a guy that you don't expect to do something to have a big moment. And Cameron, it was Seventh Woods.
Mm-hmm.
Really steadied the offense as Duke tried to pressure us with, double teams in the backcourt and this, that, and the other, and made some big-time plays. Had to steal in the alley-oop pass to Garrison before halftime to push the lead back up to double digits. And so I think we're going to need some of that Saturday night, whether it's Seventh Woods again, maybe Brandon Robinson breaks out of a shooting slump, but also Nazir Little is what we would consider a role player because he's the team's 6th man.
Right.
Wasn't very effective in Cameron. But he had a really good game against Boston College, and he's shown when he has a good game, he normally follows it with another good game, and maybe he comes off the bench and gives us maybe 8 and 6 or 12 and 5 and 10 foul shots, whatever it is. Right. But I also do agree with you with Garrison Brooks. I think the kid just understands because one of the few times you're gonna have a mismatch inside. If you do the work that you're capable of doing, you're going to be rewarded with points and rebounds, and more importantly, a win. We've linked it to Kennedy Meeks before Kennedy became a senior. He showed up really in the Duke games, was a
right.
force on both ends, and that's been Garrison through his first 2 years. And I think you'll get a good effort from him again on Saturday. The rebounding in the first game was 46-41 Carolina. I think Carolina is going to have to win the rebounding margin again just because that's how it goes in the ACC. They're coming off a plus 25 rebound disparity at Boston College. I don't think it's going to be that big of a difference Saturday night, but Lord willing, if it is, it'll help us find a way to get a win much easier. Is there anything else you want to talk about matchup-wise where we just flat out pick the winner and the guy that's going to carry us to a win?
I just wanted to throw out one more thing about Nassir Little, and this was something that was brought up on the broadcast the other night, and I just thought was a terrific observation from, I think it was actually a quote from Roy Williams, or maybe it was just a thought from Eric Montross. He said, when you look at Nassir Little, he's a guy that really, when he isn't most successful, is when he gets off to a good start. And when he struggles, it's because he gets off to a bad start. It seems like his game kind of depends on what those first 2 or 3 shots look like. If he's able to get, start 2 of 3 from the field, drive the basket a couple of times, maybe even get to the free throw line once or twice, that's when you start to see him, perform at the level that we know that he's capable of. But there have been some of those times where he's gotten off to a slow start, and you can see that kind of affects him, and that's part of being a freshman. So, that's one of the things that I encourage people to keep an eye on. When he steps on the floor, just take a look at, his start and how, he ends up getting, if he gets off to a good start, the body language should show you that he's, ready to go and that he should get off to, he should have a good game. And, if he does struggle, you can usually see that, he starts to get a little bit frustrated and really starts to give the ball up a little bit more and not be as aggressive as when he is having success. So that's the other thing that I would want Carolina fans to keep an eye on. And I know now we'll get to the predictions, so we'll let you start out, buddy.
I was going to let you go first tonight, but all right. Carolina's at home. Have a chance to sweep Duke for the first time since the 2009 national championship run. If they do win this game, they likely, in my opinion, lock up a number 1 seed for the NCAA tournament. They also share a ACC championship with Virginia if Virginia was to happen to beat Louisville Saturday at 4 o'clock. And that we've seen this team just mature with the Duke win.
Right.
Everyone worried that they followed up with the win over Florida State, and they dismantled Florida State. They got down early against Syracuse, responded in a big way. Had to go to Clemson, a team that's desperate, found a way to win. Would they overlook Boston College? No, they didn't. They ended that game in the first half. I think this team understands that they're good enough, to beat Duke, and really this is another chance, whether Zion's on the floor or not, to make a statement, cement yourself as a national championship contender on the biggest stage of college basketball. And I firmly believe that Luke May is going to finish his Carolina career, or at least for the Smith Center portion, with a bang. It just has that kind of feel. Mm-hmm. He's been too good a story to not have a big game to lead the Carolina to a win over Duke, and I think it's what's going to happen. I think we find a way to win a high-scoring affair. I think it's going to be a much more cleaner game than the game in Cameron, where it was kind of ugly, but you got to win ugly sometimes. I think you're going to see both the Carolina getting the game into the 90s. So a fun, free-flowing game that Carolina just ultimately runs away from the Blue Devils, sweeps them, and we head into March or to the ACC tournament as confident as ever.
Well, when I look at this game, I think one of the motivating factors outside of the fact that it is the Duke game, because people might say, well, look, Virginia's probably going to win against Louisville. Here's the other thing. If Carolina loses, no matter what, if they lose this game, they're a 3 seed in the ACC tournament. If you win, you're a 2 seed. And again, I've talked about this a little bit, and I encourage people to go look through it. I would rather play the 7 seed in the ACC tournament, which at this point I believe is lining up to be, again, it's just right now, I mean, the ACC is just all over the place, but I believe it's lining up to be Louisville. as opposed to having to play Syracuse, a team that has historically been very successful when it's come to the tournament atmosphere. So, I think that has to play a factor. And then the other thing that has to play a factor is this game probably decides who is in contention to be a 1 seed. I don't know if that would automatically lock Carolina in as a 1 seed. I would, if I was taking bets, I would probably say yes, but let's say they win and then we do fall to the 7 seed, then maybe it's not a guarantee. But I think that sets you up in a fantastic place to potentially be a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and it's a huge thing to basically control your own destiny. I mean, we know, look, a 16 upset of 1 last year, but for Carolina, Roy Williams has not been beaten in the round of 64. So, to start the tournament, Roy has always been fantastic. I think that, Carolina would be in a good spot if they get that 1 seed, and being able to, have some say, because more than likely they would probably be the number 3, number 1 seed if everything was to pan out as some would expect if they win this game. They would be able to go. They won't be going out west because Gonzaga will be there, and then likely they won't be. If I had to guess, I would say in the east. That's probably where Virginia will go, but they could end up in the south, which I think could be really huge for them. I think that's something that Carolina knows in their back of their mind. As you mentioned, it's an emotional senior night because these guys have meant a ton, especially a guy like Luke May, who was just a hard worker. And, I think Luke's going to have a good game. I think Cam Johnson really comes out and performs well, because this was a guy that, we're not going to say that he was, he was playing under a coach in Kevin Stallings who he really just didn't have a good relationship with, or he committed to Vanderbilt back in the day, transferred, and then would have played under Kevin Stallings last year had he stayed. But when Kevin Stallings came there, he transferred out and really got a chance to restart his college basketball career. And, he was a guy that was pretty much known as just someone that could knock down threes, play a little defense, not much. Now he's arguably one of the better two-way players in the ACC. He has had an unbelievable senior year. The shooting numbers are unbelievable. He's shooting, 48.6%, I believe, from 3, somewhere up in that range. That may have changed with the game against Boston College, but I know that was the percentage coming into the game against Boston College. I see him having a great night. I think, the thing that's so hard when it comes to Cam Johnson is, if he gets any sort of separation, he's able to knock down shots on you. He's not a guy that needs a ton of space to be able to get off a shot because he's got such a quick release. I think that he really comes out and performs well, and I think Carolina gets the win. I'll say it's somewhere between 4 and 6 points, not like I predicted in the first game where I said we'd have to beat him at the buzzer. And I think, the Smith Center crowd plays into the game just a tad bit. But I'm telling you, I think everybody's ready for this matchup, because this time I don't think it really matters if Zion is in the lineup or not. I think people know that this game is for all the marbles, and whoever wins will get a much-deserved win.
Yeah, hopefully we're both right, whether, and both the guys we wanted to see play well. With that, we'll move on to the buzzer beater, which is filled with some stats regarding the rivalry. But first, on some other notes, I want to wish Luke May a happy birthday, as he turned 22 years old today. So happy birthday, Luke. Next, Saturday is senior night for Luke, Kenny, and Cam. There are no walk-ons tonight, so that means Carolina will be able to start their traditional starting 5 lineup.
Right.
It's one of the few years that happens, but this is the one year that we do not have any walk-ons from the JV that are seniors. That'll, of course, come around next year with, I think, Caleb Ellis, I think, will be a senior, and maybe some other guys on the KJ. Some of those guys will be seniors, and we'll get to start a game for Carolina. On another note, which is rather sad, a year ago today we lost Woody Durham. I remember where I was when I got the notification that he passed away, and he was a guy that even for us was the first voice of Carolina athletics. Because he was still on the radio when we were younger, and I remember me as a young kid, we didn't have cable for a while. That was my way to follow Carolina basketball, was on the radio, like kids were doing back in the 70s and the 80s. So an emotional day, but we understand he's in a better place, he's in a healthy place, and his son is doing a really good job covering the ACC for Raycom and Fox Sports South, and just thankful for what he did for Carolina, both athletically, but also for the university and the community. Is there anything you want to touch on regarding the 1-year anniversary of Woody?
Well, I mean, I remember exactly where I was as well. I actually was at school at the Carolina School of Broadcasting in Charlotte, and got the notification. We were supposed to do updates on the news that was going on around the area. It was actually our first time on air. And I said, look, I want to do something on Woody Durham. It was a music station that, they run at the school, and I went way over and started talking over the song, but I really just didn't even care because, this guy was just so special to all of us. And, I think one of the other big things for us is, we are guys that, just admire Jones Angell so much and everything that he does for Carolina athletics. And we just think that, he's a guy that we are trying to sort of craft our careers around and try to be similar to, the way he is, his work ethic, and, just how successful he's been. And one of the big things for him, he was a guy that learned from Woody Durham, and we heard Woody for a very long time as well. As you mentioned, Woody was with us during the 2009 title run when we were younger, and we still remember those days. So, it's definitely sad, but at the same time, it's always good when you see on these days the old highlights, the good moments from Woody and the stuff you want to remember about him. And, there's always going to be some sadness on these days, but look, always go back and just, even though you get a little bit sad, take a look at some of those memories. Go back and watch some of those videos of Woody. Whenever, same thing with Dean. Go back and watch some of the videos of Coach Smith coaching and Woody Durham on the call, and just think, these guys, they're up in heaven doing the same thing. So, that's where I think I get, a little bit of comfort out of it. And, it's always going to be one of those days that, no Carolina fans don't want to remember. But, it's look at it like this. You're remembering because you care. And, you're remembering because Woody made such a great impact. And we were so blessed to have someone like Woody Durham be a part of the Carolina family for so many years, and the voice of the Tar Heels for all those years as well.
All right. Now let's get to some stats regarding Saturday's game. When they tip off on Saturday, it'll be the 12th time they've met as top 5 teams. Carolina leads the previous 11 matchups 6-5. This is the 150th straight game that at least one has been ranked. The last time that they played and neither team was ranked, February 27th, 1960. So well over 50 years ago. This is the 71st meeting as both ranked teams. Carolina leads the previous 70, 36-34. Of course, it was 35-34 then they won in February. The overall series is 138-111 Carolina. The last 100 is a split, an even 50-50. The last 10 is a split, even 5-5, and they've scored the same amount of points over the last 10 games at 785. So just some wacky stats that just go to further prove that, Auburn, Alabama, and football, and Michigan and Ohio State and football is good, and Louisville, Kentucky, and basketball is really good. But they don't have what this has. Then you throw in the two teams that are, in my opinion, they're the two best programs in the sport. And they're 8 miles away that play in the same conference, competing for conference and national championships. Then you add in all of the crazy stats. It just further proves why this is the greatest rivalry in at least American sports. can't speak for overseas boys because we're not overseas people,
right.
and we know they take their soccer seriously. But we know here, outside of this, you give me Yankees, Red Sox, or maybe Bears and Packers. Nothing else lives up to this, and Saturday's going to be another fun one. So, I know we're looking forward to it. We'll be hanging out one way or another watching this game, and we'll have a full breakdown. I want to thank you for joining me while you're in Florida on business. Wanted your opinion on this game, and we'll have your thoughts after the game. And so thank you for that, and we'll thank you guys for listening. You always subscribe to this podcast through Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Check out the blog on Medium, Facebook, or Twitter. Check out Anthony Roy's Heel Tough blog and podcast on all its insights. Pretty much the same one the Roy's Boys is. And we'll keep jumping on things going Carolina football and basketball. Thank you guys for listening. Go Tar Heels.